I'm going to play 3 different licks, and I want you to listen and see if you can tell what they all have in common. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. And here's the third one. Obviously, if you clicked on this video, you're expecting something about the country scale. And all 3 of those phrases or those licks that I just played are all actually derived from notes within what I would call or consider the quote country scale. What I am kind of envisioning for this video today, obviously we're going to go over what that actual scale is, what those notes are, but I wanted it to kind of be a crash course of sorts in country soloing, how to improvise over some standard country changes like a 1-4-5 progression, kind of either like a train beat or a country shuffle, something like that. And yeah, just using the notes out of this one scale, just in this one position to achieve those sounds. So I'm just going to show you the scale really quickly, and then we can kind of talk about where it comes from. We're going to do this in the key of E, and we're starting with our pinky up here on the root, on the low E on the 12th fret here. And then so we're going to start there. We're going to play all 4 fingers from 9 to 12 on the A string. 9, 10, 11, 12. We're going to do 9, 11, and 12 on both the G string, or the D string and the G string. And then on the highest 2 strings, we're going to do 9, 10, and 12. So altogether that sounds like this. And then back down. So I like this pattern because the 2 middle strings, the D and the G string, share the same kind of pattern. And then the 2 highest strings share the same pattern as well. And then you just have to remember on the A string it's all 4 notes. And then obviously just ending with our root on that low E string. So we can kind of think about this scale as a combination of like a E major scale or just a major scale, but instead of our regular 7th degree of the scale, which would be like a major 7th, we're playing a flatted 7th. So right, like a regular E major scale, if we're going to play it kind of in this position, right, has that D sharp, whereas for the sake of this, we're going to be playing that flatted 7th. And then obviously as we continue up, right, we have that flatted 7th again. And then the other thing we're going to add is we're going to add a minor third in addition to our major third that's already included in the major scale. So what that would sound like, that minor third there, and then right here as well. So that minor third to major third, kind of alternating between the 12th fret there and then the 9th fret on the B string right above it. And the cool thing about this, playing it in this position, if we were up kind of in like our E major bar chord shape, we can obviously hit both of those notes again, but we can't have them both ring out at the same time. Whereas in this position, we can play the minor third, play the major third over it, and kind of get that half step rub, or like kind of they kind of clash, those 2 notes. And I'll show some examples later where we kind of use that to our benefit. So, but yeah, you can think about it basically as a E major or just like a major scale, but with a flatted 7th instead of the regular 7th, and then using that addition of that minor third in there as well. One thing I should mention briefly, I'm talking about basing this all off of like the E major scale. Obviously, we're doing this in the key of E. I can move this to like an A and do it, like make it an A major country scale, right? But we can think about it being like an E major shape, but we can also probably more commonly for this position think about it as being based out of like a E major pentatonic shape, right? Which probably most of you are familiar with. it's the same exact fingering as the minor pentatonic, just shifted down 3 frets. So that might be a more comfortable way for some of you to think about starting this. Like, I'm just going to that major pentatonic box, but then adding in these other notes. The other way you can think about kind of finding this quickly, if we know our cage system, right? We're still playing the E chord, right? But if I'm right here, this is the A shape. This whole pattern is kind of basically based off of this A shape, right? So that's just some other quick ways to kind of think about jumping into this scale shape on the neck in relation to either like chord shapes or major pentatonic scales, if you know those already. And then back down. So we kind of talked about the scale itself. I'm gonna just kind of hit on some of those notes, like that minor third, kind of some things we can do with that flatted seventh, ways to target those notes within the scale in a way that makes it, gives it that country sound. So just to start it off, that minor third we're talking about, that's a super common sound going from minor to major third, right? Right, like any of those trills, that's all just hammering on from the minor third to the major third. Kind of, even if you think about like a working man blues, that whole lick is based around that idea. So obviously having that included in our country scale is going to be super beneficial to us. And some ways I like to think about it, one, just kind of realizing where it is within your scale, right? We start on our root, we have our regular second degree of the scale, and then this kind of that passing tone right there, that's our minor third going up to that major third. And then the same thing up here, that 2-note interval right there is that minor third, and then our major third on top of it. And this position here where, right, I'm playing on the 12th fret on that G string, and then the 9th fret on that B string, I love that kind of that clash, that rub that those two notes give us. A lot of what you'll find as you get into this country style is there's a lot of tension and resolve within the soloing. And that's kind of what makes it interesting and unique. So, right, we can hang out on that. And all I'm doing there is I'm kind of keeping both of those pressed down, letting them both ring out against each other, the minor third and major third. And then obviously, when you're done, you can repeat that as long as you want to kind of create some tension in your solo, then resolve it back to the actual E note. A common way I like to incorporate the minor third in the lower octave, right, this one down here, is doing kind of a slide from that up to that major third, and then either hitting our low root or that root an octave up. So, right, ending our licks with that is a very common sound you hear in this genre. Or we could end it. So yeah, I kind of use the two different minor third to major third intervals differently depending on whether I'm playing that lower register or that higher register. But those are two super common ways to use them within this scale. Another idea using that minor third to major third, which I did in the kind of those intro licks, is starting off my whole run, my whole phrase with that idea. And I do it, I go outside of the shape, so I cheat a little bit, right? But it's those same notes. I'm playing the flatted third, then the major third, but instead of playing it on two different strings, I'm sliding into it on that B string. And then I pick that high E again. So I'm using that minor to major. And then that second note's that flatted seventh. That's just another good way to think about like getting into the scale, right? If I'm, say I'm playing rhythm, and then it's time for me to solo. I can jump into that shape immediately just by knowing like where that relationship is within the chord shapes I'm shooting for. So now we can't have a country guitar lesson without talking about bending strings, right? That last example I showed you kind of had some bent strings in it as well. So I think that's a good segue to kind of just have a whole section dedicated to how we can bend notes within the same scale shape, right? So I've talked about this in other lessons, and I'll try to point the guitar a little bit more at the camera. I think I was getting a little away from it there in the last bit. But I've talked about this before, just the most common country bend, right? So that's kind of our basic bend, right? But we can kind of utilize all of these notes above that bent note, right? We have that one, we can do this one, which is just a unison bend. And we can even add all of them in like a descending pattern like this. And what I'm doing there, right, we can kind of descend down the strings using a bend pattern as well, which is kind of a fun way to use it, right? After we're done doing whatever crazy bends we want to do up here. So there I'm just doing that kind of that half step bend, then hitting our root again up here. So I'm doing the same shape on the D and the G string, and then doing it again on the A and the D string. And in this one, you have to be careful sometimes about bending the string up over rolling it up over the top of the fretboard. So sometimes to get away from that, or to avoid doing that if I'm playing live, I don't want to make a mistake, right? I'll just slide up instead of bending up and rolling that risk, or running that risk of rolling it over. Kind of a good lick that showcases all of that would be something like this. One other thing, just since we're on the topic and I'm just throwing everything I can think of at you guys, another way to get even a little bit more creative with this bending ideas is doing it up on the B string and the high E string. We can do stuff like this. Right, and I'm kind of using like a double stop idea there, where I'm picking two strings at once. But same thing, all those notes, even the original note and the note we're bending to, are just out of this scale. That's another just kind of fun way to incorporate some more non-traditional bends that all just incorporate these notes. So one thing I just want to touch on before we get too far along, I did not come up with this scale. I actually picked it up from kind of a series of other guitar lessons I had seen on YouTube years ago. For a long time I had been trying to play country primarily out of the minor pentatonic shape, right? So if we're in the key of E, I'm playing up here instead of down here in the major shape. And it would kind of work, but the relationship between the strings, like doing some of those bends, just it always seemed to end up sounding a little more bluesy than country, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But once I realized the easiest way to do it quickly is to build it out of that major shape, that major pentatonic with those added extra notes. That's when it kind of started to click for me as far as doing it on a improvisational, if that's a word, a level where like I'm actually improvising and I play it back. I'm like, yeah, that actually sounds like what a country guitar player would do. A lot of the great country guitar players, when you watch them pick, they're using these notes, and a lot of times they're even using it from this exact shape that I'm showing you. So, but yeah, like I said, I am not responsible for this idea at all. I'm just kind of trying to pass on what was shown to me. So that second example that I used in the beginning portion kind of had like a Western swing feel to it. And once again, all those notes from that lick are directly from this scale within this shape. Western swing is kind of one of those genres you got to listen to it a lot, because it's not so much about the notes, like anyone can play the scale up and down. A lot of it comes down to the phrasing of how they're using space in between and landing on different notes and hanging out on different notes. To be perfectly transparent, I'm not the person you should be taking Western swing advice from. I love listening to it. I love trying my best to play it, but to actually like truly play it, you got to dedicate a lot of time, and I'm not there quite yet. But just some ideas kind of outside of this, but if you are more focused on that Western swing stuff, the major scale obviously includes the 6th degree of that scale, right? Which is this note, right, compared to our E or our root. And then it's also here. But a lot of Western swing, not a lot of it, but certainly the 6th is outlined a lot in that style of music. So once again, this is kind of outside the scope of this specific scale, but kind of the one thing I would say is if you learn some chord shapes, specifically like your 6th inversions, so like an E major 6, and we can kind of slide in to give it that chromatic feel. We can do it up here too. Just as kind of ways to give it that more jazzy, classic Western swing sound. And then obviously while we're playing through, accenting and highlighting that 6th note. Like I said, I'm not the one to take Western swing lessons from, but just kind of some quick ideas to touch on that subject, since one of the intro examples that I used was that style. I included that because I think it's a testament to how impressive this scale is, right? You can play the more classic chicken picking stuff that I've been demonstrating, but then also you can use these exact same notes and get that Western swing sound, which I think is pretty cool. Something I can talk to is using that flat 7th. One of my favorite ways to do it is a repeating lick that I've taught in another video. I guess same thing, to start out realizing where it is within our scale, right? So we're in the key of E again, the D string on the 12th fret is a D note, obviously, which is the flatted 7th in the key of E. So a favorite lick of mine kind of has like a rockabilly vibe. And all I'm doing there is I'm barring, right? We talked about the A shape from our cage system. So this is actually an E triad. And then I'm alternating between this and then picking that flatted 7th. And then so I'm alternating between the 7th degree up here on the 12th fret and the 5th of E down here on the 9th fret. And this is just, I'm always barring it, so I'm never lifting this finger. This is also just a great exercise for getting chicken picking and hybrid picking kind of a little bit faster. Anyways, you guys get the idea on that. That's a great one that uses that flat 7th. Another thing, or another idea that uses that flat 7th, we kind of, when we were talking about the bend licks, we kind of use this a little bit. This part of it where I'm doing this bend, I'm not bending up to the flat 7th, but the note I pick afterwards is that flatted 7th, right? So that on the high E string, that 10th fret is our dominant 7th there, and then a good way to end that specific lick is with our classic country bend, but instead of resolving to the E like you want to, or you'd think how it would resolve, right? That's how you normally hear that lick resolved. I'm gonna resolve it to that flat 7th now instead. And if you're planning ahead, like if you're thinking ahead while you're playing this, you can actually bend with your middle finger instead of your ring finger, right? A lot of times I just kind of defer to bending with my ring finger here. But if I think about it, I'll bend with my middle finger, which then leaves my ring finger available to hit that without having to kind of pull the finger off and then jump a string. So that's another cool lick, just using that flat 7th kind of twice in 2 different parts. That one kind of has like that Mama Tried, Merle Haggard feel to it, that pre-bent string, then landing on that dominant 7. Roy Nichols kind of made that famous. He was Merle Haggard's guitar player. But that's an excellent use of that, throwing in that flat 7 within this style of playing. Another thing for the guys that are a little bit more advanced, there's a fun way to kind of do like an ascending pattern and a descending pattern. A lot of this is kind of derived from stuff Johnny Hyland does. He likes to start a lot of his solos with just these 3 notes, right? And a way you can kind of use, whether you want to alternate pick the whole thing or use like hybrid picking plus legato, but like an ascending pattern like this. Right, obviously there I ascended it and then descended it as well. But literally all those notes are just directly from the scale we just showed, right? I'm kind of highlighting that minor major third at times. And then just, yeah, using that combination to kind of create some faster runs using this idea, this shape. So the last thing I want to talk about is just moving this. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know I always am harping on like this 1-4-5 progression, right? In the key of E, that'd be like an E, an A, to a B, to an E. And within this genre, within this style of playing, we have to match the changes, right? Or play the changes. So as we're playing through the band or the backing track, rhythm section's playing an E chord, right? This is our go-to spot. The second it goes to an A, we now have to think, okay, if I'm using my pinky on this root up here on the 12th fret, if I'm using this as my designator for where I'm starting the scale, I now have to think about this finding the A. Well, we know A is on our 5th fret. Right, so now we have those notes. And then for B, obviously, we're just going to move it up 2 shapes, or 2 frets. And then we can play notes out of this B country scale, and then when the song goes back to either A or E, we just jump again. And the ultimate goal with all of this is to be able to play all the different shapes in all the different positions, right? So if we could play over like a 1-4-5 in the key of E, and without jumping each time the chords change, right? We can play the E notes here, and then when it goes to A, we just know what the similar notes are in the A scale, but up in this range, and then similar, we do the same thing with B. But like I said, if you're just kind of starting out on this genre, there's nothing wrong with just jumping every time you got to change chords to kind of match the new chord with its respective scale in that relates to it. Anyways, that's a lot of words to try to say. Just play the changes, move this, just find your new root, and go from there. Hopefully that makes sense. The last thing I kind of want to touch on with this is just learning the scale up and down is great. Like, I would certainly get it under your muscle memory, but that's not ever going to be enough regardless of what style of music you're trying to play, right? We can't just learn scales. We have to learn how to play the right notes within the scales at the right time. So one of the things I don't think is emphasized enough is, on top of practicing a scale and learning a bunch of these solos that use this stuff, you got to listen to this stuff like a lot, right? So just a little quick plug. I don't have any of my own music on there, but I have a Spotify playlist where I kind of just showcase a lot of great country guitar. So I'll link that down below, and if you guys are on Spotify, I would highly recommend just checking it out, listen to it. There's other great country guitar playlists on there as well, but just spend a lot of time listening to this style, listening to this genre, and just get your ear used to hearing what these players are doing, because that will make practicing this stuff and building your own licks from it a lot easier. Yeah, so that's kind of all I got as far as this quote country scale is concerned. Hopefully this all kind of makes sense. I know I kind of just rushed through it. I pretty much just spoke about stuff as it came to me, so I'll probably do some editing post recording this and try to make it at least somewhat cohesive. Hopefully it ends up that way. But yeah, I appreciate it if you've stuck through this long. Hopefully these are ideas that you can take and use, build on, and start incorporating it into what you guys are doing. So yeah, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good New Year, and we will see you all in the next video.